Heavy metals in school air samples. 89% of children tested show aluminum poisoning. Pediatricians won't tell you. Schools won't test. I will. Check your child's symptoms against this list. A brief, stark list of symptoms flashes. Persistent cough, unexplained fatigue, short-term memory disappearance. We are not talking about common seasonal irritants. We are talking about something insidious, something engineered to be invisible. My investigation began, as all good investigations do, with a single contradiction. I took air samples from 3 schools in the same low-income residential district. The samples were sent to a private, non-accredited lab. The results came back shocking. Concentrations of target metals in the air far exceeded the Environmental Protection Agency's established safe limits. These aren't just airborne elements, these are the signature components of geoengineering and aerosol dispersion experiments. The levels I recorded were not random environmental spikes. They were consistent, prolonged, and pointed to an intentional introduction over time. The private lab director noted that such precise, sustained delivery of these contaminants was indicative of an engineered dispersion vector, eliminating the possibility of standard industrial pollution. The school district had recently invested millions of dollars in a state-of-the-art, high-efficiency HVAC system. These systems, correctly installed, should scrub these precise ultrafine particulates from the air. They should not be there. This was the core contradiction. The contracts were publicly available, showing the specific micron filtration rating, which made the presence of these fine metal particles mathematically impossible, assuming the system was performing its advertised function. Furthermore, the warranty agreement specified penalties for third-party modification, making the discovery I was about to make even more financially damaging for the district, yet they maintained the cover-up. I acquired the school's official public air quality report, dated after the HVAC installation. On screen, you can see the comparison. The school's official report shows air quality as immaculate, a clean flat line across the board. My private report shows multiple dangerous spikes of the signature contaminants. One report is true, the other is a cover story. The difference is measured in the health of your children. This deliberate falsification of public safety documents was the first tangible proof of a systematic cover-up extending from the school board all the way up. It was an administrative lie, signed and dated, proving the deception was formalized at the highest levels of local governance. I drove to the first school late at night. The HVAC unit itself was a massive, humming beast on the rooftop. It was functioning perfectly, meaning its function was not to filter. I inspected the internal wiring harness, focusing on the sensor suite. Tucked away beneath a protective plate, I found a small, ceramic-coated tag. It was inconsistent with the manufacturer's standard schema. It was a foreign component, an implant. The installation was precise, indicating professional, outside work performed after the official system was certified. The tag itself was encased in a proprietary polymer, making its physical removal or breaking exceedingly difficult without sophisticated tools. I realized this wasn't an equipment failure. This was a third-party intervention, and the moment I touched that wire, they knew I was there. This small tag, no bigger than a fingernail, was the first thread. It wasn't the signature of the company that built the HVAC system. Using its serial code, I traced it back to a seemingly innocuous document from the Regional Environmental Oversight Board, REOB. This was the first true anomaly. The REOB explicitly states it has no jurisdiction over public school air quality. Why would their inventory tag be attached to a piece of unauthorized hardware inside a public school HVAC system? The document listed a specific REOB contact for asset tracking. I called the number. The line was a static-laced, disconnected satellite line, a type of communication once used by a different federal agency 10 years ago. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure that number existed on paper but could never be used. The trail had been deliberately made cold. I ran the static signature through a decoder, but it only confirmed the line had been scrubbed clean hours before my call. The data suggested the number was a designated honeypot designed solely to identify the moment someone tried to follow that particular paper trail. The failed call instantly raised the stakes. Someone knew I was tracing the paper trail, or perhaps they were simply anticipating that anyone who got this far would try. The focus shifted from the air samples to the paper architecture of the cover-up. The Regional Environmental Oversight Board was the key. I went deep into the REOB's public financial records. Using custom algorithms, I isolated a pattern of redacted budget lines spanning the 3 years that coincided with the installation of the high-efficiency HVAC systems across the district. The numbers were large millions of dollars that seemingly disappeared, and the descriptions were uniform. Project AER. The term appeared over 40 times, each entry followed by an identical, solid black block of redaction. The sheer volume of these entries confirmed this was not an isolated incident, but a federally funded, systemic deployment spanning dozens of properties. The redaction pattern was sophisticated, using multiple overlapping federal statutes to shield the expense from any simple Freedom of Information Act request. 40 times, the code Project AER appeared. This wasn't local corruption. This was the name of the operation. I was about to find out who owned it, but I knew the next click could be the one that ceases the investigation. Project AER was the code name. I knew the information I needed wouldn't be on the public server. I located a tertiary archive for regional government files, an older, slower backup server that had been neglected. There, I retrieved a partial document, a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, between the REOB and an unknown entity called the Biosustainment Research Group, BSRG. The name itself sounded clinical and foreboding, a deliberately vague title designed to obscure any meaningful activity. This BSRG was not registered as a legitimate nonprofit or academic institution. Its incorporation documents traced back to a series of shell companies based overseas. The moment I tried to download the full unredacted MOU, a powerful targeted denial of service attack slammed my secure network. It was professional. It was immediate. It confirmed I was on the right track and that the forces of them were actively monitoring the data. The stakes were no longer just professional, they were personal. The attack attempted to wipe not just the file, but my entire operating system, demonstrating a powerful, state-level capability. I was forced to physically disconnect the terminal, preserving only the partial document and confirming that the digital boundary had been crossed. Later that evening, an unmarked gray van was seen idling near my initial testing location for nearly an hour. Though nothing happened, the next morning, there was a faint but distinct smell of ozone and burnt metal lingering in the air where it had been parked, a subtle, sensory warning. It was the scent of sophisticated electronic surveillance. I found minute tire track indentations that suggested the vehicle was heavily armored or weighted, inconsistent with a casual surveillance team. The partial MOU was mostly blacked out. The purpose of the BSRG was obscured by suspicious gaps in the text. But there was one piece of data they missed. In the tiny font of the footer metadata, there was a single, non-redacted GPS coordinate. I plotted the point. It did not lead to a corporate office or a lab. It led to a vast, abandoned 1,950 seconds-era municipal water treatment plant on the extreme edge of the county. The site was known locally as the Iron Lung, overgrown, derelict, fenced off, and untouched for 4 decades. I checked the distance. The coordinate was less than 1/4 mile from the cluster of schools that had tested highest for the target metals. The water plant was not abandoned. It was the designated forbidden location. The proximity was too precise to be accidental. It was the hub for the entire localized operation. The structure, though old, offered total anonymity and a vast infrastructure capable of handling large-scale air or water circulation systems. The sheer desolation of the old municipal water treatment plant was a cinematic signpost for a deep, entrenched secret. I approached it under the cover of a dense nighttime fog. Sensory detail. The perimeter fence was rusted and breached, but the air was unnaturally silent. A massive, sprawling complex that seemed to absorb all sound. But cutting through the silence, deep beneath the ground, was a faint, rhythmic, mechanical hum. The hum was low, deep, and perfectly steady. It wasn't the sound of an abandoned facility. It was the sound of something active, massive, and functioning right below the surface. This was not the decline of 4 decades. This was active concealment. The temperature around the main foundation felt unnaturally warm, suggesting a major power source was operating deep within the earth. The investigation pivoted from paper evidence to structural evidence. I had acquired the original 1,957 blueprints from the county archives. A quick check of the schematics against the physical structure revealed the architectural anomaly. The blueprints showed 2 main filtration levels and a basement. The physical structure clearly had a massive, unlisted subterranean level beneath the basement. The entrance had been sealed decades ago with a thick wall of reinforced, military-grade concrete. This unlisted level was the core of the mystery. The concrete alone was 5 feet thick, suggesting an operation that required extreme isolation and security. The blueprints included highly specific geological readings, indicating the hidden level was built to withstand significant seismic activity or even a localized blast event. My attention was drawn to a seemingly insignificant feature on the roof, a rarely used ventilation exhaust stack. Unlike the rest of the facility, which was covered in decades of grime, this stack was visibly polished and recently maintained. I took an air sample directly from the mouth of this stack. The lab results from this new sample were chilling. The same signature contaminants, but at exponentially higher concentrations, thousands of times the safe limit. The stack was not venting harmless moisture. It was venting the source of the contamination. This proved the water plant was the aerosol distribution point. The fine dust near the outlet was a powdery white residue, visually confirming the heavy metal particulates that had been released into the atmosphere. As I examined the sealed entrance, a sudden, brief power fluctuation occurred. The deep, rhythmic hum from underground stopped instantly. The sound was replaced by the noise of massive, heavy internal machinery locking into place, then silence. It felt like the facility had realized it had been found and was bracing for inspection. Near the concrete seal, a partially smashed plaque lay half buried in the dirt. It bore a logo that matched the fragments I had seen in the redacted BSRG Memorandum of Understanding. The fragments, when digitally reconstructed, revealed the BSRG motto: Control through subtlety. The deeper secret was in plain sight, high atop the rusted water tower. Non-standard, high-frequency antenna arrays were expertly disguised within the structure's scaffolding, transmitting and receiving unknown data. These arrays were sophisticated, clearly designed to transmit data bursts over long distances, confirming the operation's centralized control far away from the site. They were directional antennae, aimed with unnerving precision toward a corporate headquarters 80 miles away, not the local municipal building. With specialized, low-profile fiber optic gear, I managed to exploit a faulty seal near the base of the maintained ventilation stack, inserting a small camera probe down the shaft past the sealed concrete level. The feed immediately crackled with static, then stabilized. The camera delivered an image of a vast, pressurized chamber filled with pulsing, blue-white light and incredibly complex machinery. It was a modern, high-tech operation hidden within a ruin. The scale of the hidden chamber suggested a cost well into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The walls of the chamber were lined with sound-dampening panels, explaining the earlier unnatural silence. Just as the camera focused on the central machine, a shadow moved across the lens, too quickly for me to identify. A second later, there was a loud, sharp crack from below, and the camera feed cut out instantly. They were inside. They were watching. And they had just ended the probe. The resulting feedback spike was so powerful it momentarily disabled my external recording device. The sound of the crack suggested the probe hadn't just been deactivated, but physically flattened by a piece of heavy equipment. The scale of this operation is staggering. What do you think they're hiding down there? Comment below. The loss of the probe confirmed my fear. The threat was not passive, it was systemic and actively defended. The focus shifted from how they covered it up to why and how the dispersal mechanism worked. I returned to the structural blueprints and Knowing the rough location of the ventilation stack, managed to bypass the exterior perimeter and gain access to a secondary, long-forgotten maintenance tunnel that led to the lower basement level just above the sealed chamber. I had only minutes before the internal security sweep reached my location. I rigged a tripwire near the tunnel entrance, a small, cheap distraction that might buy me the precious 60 seconds I needed inside. I breached the chamber wall. What I found was the core secret: a complex automated aerosol generation and dispersion system. The true purpose of Project AER. This system was not built to filter air. It was built to seed it. I found the operational blueprints for the dispersal mechanism. It was a low-pressure, wide-area diffusion technique designed to inject ultrafine particles of the target metals into the regional atmosphere at specific times of day. Crucially, the size of the particulates was so small that they were untouchable by standard residential or even most commercial HVAC filters, precisely why the new school filters made no difference. The system was calibrated to target passive intake systems, primarily in schools and older homes. The sheer engineering precision was terrifying. This was the work of dedicated scientific effort, not casual pollution. The blueprints showed the system was timed to align precisely with school dismissal times, maximizing exposure as children left the filtered environment. A terrifying moment ensued when a scheduled maintenance protocol for the system activated. The chamber filled with a low, visible, silvery mist, the exact heavy metal signature I had found in the air samples. The air became thick, metallic, and instantly suffocating, forcing me to retreat slightly while still documenting the active dispersal. The system hummed louder, the air pressure increasing slightly, confirming the full operation capacity of Project AER. I located the system's primary computer terminal and forcibly accessed a locked data log. The log contained thousands of entries under the chilling header, Target Demographic Compliance. The entries were tagged with timestamps and specific location data that perfectly corresponded to the school districts and surrounding low-income, high-density family neighborhoods. The final, damaging realization came from the system's operational timer. The seeding had been active for over 7 years. 7 years of continuous, intentional exposure to an unwitting population. The compliance log also tracked local pediatric admissions for specific cognitive and respiratory issues, creating a direct, horrifying correlation. Just as I finished printing the most critical log headers and the detailed schematics for the dispersal system, the alarm triggered. An unidentified security team breached the facility perimeter. They were silent, efficient, and wearing no identifiable insignia. I was forced to flee through the tunnel, narrowly escaping detection. The team's rapid entry and deployment suggested they were a highly trained extraction or destruction unit, not standard police. I made it back to my vehicle, the printouts on the passenger seat, the hard-won evidence secured. I pulled onto the access road and glanced in the rearview mirror. In a flash of blinding light, the entire massive silent water treatment plant was suddenly and completely demolished in a controlled, secondary explosion. Every shred of physical evidence, every machine, was instantly reduced to rubble. The investigation was no longer about finding a secret, it was about surviving it. The force of the blast registered on the seismic grid over 20 miles away, instantly erasing the existence of the subterranean laboratory. The deliberate timing proved they had prioritized the destruction of the evidence over the possible passing away of life for their security detail. I set up in a secure, undisclosed location, the scent of concrete dust and ozone clinging to my jacket. But the physical evidence, the blueprints, and the compliance log printout was now the single irrefutable proof of the event. The analysis of the target demographic compliance data was the first priority. The dispersal pattern was overwhelmingly focused on low-income and high-density family areas. This suggested a clear socioeconomic dimension to the testing. It wasn't about mass population exposure. It was about targeted cohort exposure. This level of demographic specificity pointed towards sociological or behavioral testing parameters. The compliance data also segregated the cohort by age groups, focusing most heavily on elementary school children. Next, the dispersal system blueprints. They showed a small, secondary chamber labeled inert control agent. This suggested an identical parallel aerosol system was running somewhere else in the region, perhaps in an affluent school district, but without the target metal's seeding. The existence of an inert control system confirmed the scope. This was a double-blind study operating on a massive, unethical scale. The existential question crystallized. What were they testing for? Was the goal to study the effects of the metals, or to study the effects of the absence of the metals? The existence of a parallel control system removed all doubt. This was a deliberate, controlled human trial. I found a clip from a seemingly unrelated congressional hearing from 2 years prior. The man testifying was identified as a director of the BSRG, but under an alias. He spoke calmly about non-invasive, large-scale neurological research. The puzzle pieces locked together. The goal was not to cause physical harm to the children. The barium and aluminum are not the weapon. They are the delivery system for the research goal, a way to silently influence a generation's brain chemistry. I researched the compounds, finding they are scientifically linked to processes that modulate certain receptor functions in the developing brain, making the purpose clear and terrifying. The official BSRG testimony specifically lobbied for reduced environmental testing standards, effectively creating a loophole for their own operation. The final updates were rapid and unnerving. The site of the demolished water plant was immediately sealed by a massive environmental emergency response team whose vehicles clearly bore the same REOB logo. The cover-up was complete and instant. Every local news outlet reported a gas leak followed by a precautionary demolition. Within 48 hours, the local police department declared the area a long-term toxic exclusion zone, ensuring no independent investigation could ever take place. I held up the blueprint to the camera, tracing the manufacturer details. The dispersal system was built by a subsidiary of the BSRG, a company that had just been acquired by a massive multinational pharmaceutical corporation specializing in psychiatric and neurological medicines. The conspiracy was no longer local government or a rogue research group. It was corporate and global, tied directly to the future of cognitive treatment. This corporate purchase provided the operation with limitless funding, advanced legal protection, and a global distribution network for future Project AER deployment. Final unsettling revelation. I pointed to a small box on the schematic. The system, though obliterated by the controlled explosion, was equipped with a built-in remote reactivation signal. The schematics confirmed this was a standard design feature, meaning it was not the only one. This signal was a secure, low-frequency burst capability, designed to be triggered from anywhere on the planet by a specific encrypted broadcast. The local cell of Project AER was gone, but the global project was still very much alive, waiting for a single binary command to bring the next hidden facility online. The design specification labeled this feature Contingency Deployment Protocol Echo, confirming a formal, systematic plan for redundancy and rapid redeployment in new target areas. The possibility that dozens of identical, dormant dispersion systems exist across the country, each waiting for that activation signal, is the ultimate terror. The deliberate destruction of the water plant proves that for every truth we uncover, they have built 1,000 walls to keep the real story hidden in the dark. If you believe we must continue pushing back against that silence, subscribe to our channel, like this video to boost our signal, and share this evidence with everyone you know. Tell me, what aspect of Project AER, what compliance entry, did you find most unsettling? Comment below and join the analysis. Because the most chilling truth about a global experiment is that the remote control for the next one might already be in their hands. Would you like to analyze the rewording for any specific phrase or discuss the implications of the project's findings?